Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Chase and I'm the Senior Trends Analyst at Global Web Index. I'm also joined by my colleagues Katie and Olivia.
Hi everybody, I'm Katie, the Senior Trends Analyst.
And I'm Olivia, the Insights Analyst.
So today we're going to be talking about voice assistants. And when we talk about voice, we'll be talking about it across all of the devices that it sits on. But we'll be paying closer attention to the main devices of smartphones and smart home assistants. So voice technology has drawn significant attention lately. Brands are keen to understand whether they need to integrate with voice before it's too late. And it's becoming clear that this is a trend which has the potential to reshape entire industry landscapes.
So thanks to everyone for joining us today and for the introduction, Chase. During today's webinar, we'll take a closer look at the future growth opportunities for voice assistants on both smartphones and smart home devices. We'll also delve into the impact of voice assistants on certain industries and consumer privacy. Finally, we will use our bespoke survey findings to discuss the top brands and usages for both smartphone and smart home assistants and consider the opportunities for commercial messaging in voice. Olivia and Chase are now going to tell you a little bit more about who we are.
Thanks, Katie. Global Web Index is a consumer profiling company, and along with many other products, we run the world's largest syndicated study on the digital consumer. We now survey over 440,000 internet users in 44 markets around the world each year, representing around 2.6 billion internet users.
That's right. And on each one of those respondents, we're able to cross-analyze more than 25,000 different data points. And that allows us to build an unparalleled understanding of the modern digital consumer. So we do this to investigate the digital lives of these connected consumers, from their demographics, attitudes and interests, online activities, social media usage, their marketing touchpoints, and also their entire path to purchase, and also brand engagement too. So aside from this ongoing research, we also do bespoke custom research studies, which allow us to deep dive into different trends and topical areas of interests. So in this webinar, we're going to be using a mix of our ongoing global research and our custom bespoke research too. So we'll be using, towards the latter end of this webinar, a special study we conducted in August of this year, which explored voice assistant engagement in the UK and the US. So let's get started. Now, while voice isn't that new, it's certainly seen impressive growth in recent years, especially on mobile voice assistants and smart home assistants.
Yeah, and this is clearly reflected in our data. So in the last year or so, the uptake of voice technology has experienced explosive growth. Our global data shows that across our 44 tracked markets, just less than half of online adults are now using voice tech in some way, whether that's through voice search tools on their smartphones or voice-controlled assistants at home. There are, of course, big questions still to ask going forward, especially regarding the commercialization of these devices in the home. Not only whether that's possible, but also whether consumers will accept targeted advertising in such a personal environment. I want to start today by briefly discussing the growth prospects for voice going forward on the basis of the appetite for this emerging tech, regardless of these hurdles. So when we look across the regions, APAC currently sits as the most engaged with voice tech, with over 1 in 2 using voice search tools in some capacity. European users lag behind the other regions as the least enthusiastic about this emerging tech. But tellingly, we also see in our data that they're the least likely to agree that owning the latest tech is important to them. And from a market-by-market perspective, our data plainly shows that voice search growth is being driven by the key Asian markets, with India and China posting the strongest figures for voice tech uptake.
But so what does this look like when we account for age? Is this trend a part of the result of these markets' internet populations skewing towards digitally savvy younger people?
Yeah, so I have looked into this, and even when we compare just the 16 to 24s, Asian markets are still those at the top, with India just being overtaken by the UAE. We do, of course, see figures climb significantly across mature markets too, like the US and most of Europe, though. Now, despite the sharp increase in the ownership of voice-controlled home assistants, for many consumers, their introduction to voice command tools is via their smartphone, and the importance of this shouldn't be underestimated. Virtually every internet user now owns a smartphone, and we see that 2 in 3 digital consumers say it's their most important device for getting online too. Having such a central role in everyday lives has meant that smartphones have given voice tech an important platform to get in front of more people. That is, they've literally put voice search tools into millions of pockets and in some way become a gateway into the voice ecosystem. And for those internet users who don't yet own a smartphone or a model with voice technology installed, this is where upgrade cycles come into play. And with the majority of all mid to premium end mobiles currently in the market having integrated voice assistants too, it's likely that a high percentage of upgrades going forward will be to these models with this tech installed. And the consumer appetite for upgrading is promising. Our data shows that around 60% of internet users say they plan to purchase a smartphone within the next 12 months, and even among the lowest earners, this upgrade figure is around the same, showing just how widespread this behaviour has become. And again, regionally here, APAC stands out with 2/3 of its internet users planning to upgrade their mobile in the next year.
Well, you just need to look at the movements of Amazon and Google, who are making to see how this key growth area for this technology, especially as many consumers in the emerging markets in this region like India are yet to be even connected. So we should mention the importance of localization though. These voice assistants need to be able to communicate with all of the local languages and dialects in these key markets to be a success.
Yes, Chase, that's really important. And of course, consumers fulfilling their attention of upgrading their smartphones is key here too, for voice to gain all these new opportunities to demonstrate its value. That's not to say though that voice isn't already doing a good job of demonstrating its potential, which I want to discuss now. We can definitely see that voice-powered technologies like Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant are affecting a range of industries and are changing the way that people shop, listen to music, and manage their homes. Voice tech is quickly becoming more integrated into people's everyday lives. One of the industries that voice tech could impact heavily is commerce, and it's really not hard to see why voice tech is a key strategic priority for this industry. From our data, we can see that over 3 in 4 mobile voice users have purchased a product on their mobile within the past month. To add to this, our data also shows that 29% of voice tech users have used the Amazon mobile shopping app in the past month, and are 28% more likely to do so than the average user. This presents significant opportunities for voice-driven shopping. One of the biggest disruptors in the voice tech space is Amazon, which, on a global level, is the most visited retail and commerce site. Amazon has been, for some time now, strategically pushing voice commerce via its Echo device. The company's first mover advantage has allowed them to retain a certain level of control in consumer product choice. For example, when an Alexa user wants to buy something, Amazon automatically directs the consumer to their website to complete the purchase and will also recommend its own branded products. On top of this, Amazon's Prime subscription service, which ties in with its Alexa product, offers many kinds of purchasing incentives to consumers.
Well, this kind of retail strategy has also prompted other major retailers to collaborate with voice tech partners too. So I think a good example of that is Walmart partnering with Google Assistant to offer voice commerce services.
Exactly. And this is partly because voice tech has the potential to greatly enhance the company's multi-channel strategy, not just by enabling purchases, but supporting other parts of the shopping process too. For example, allowing consumers to search for items and create shopping lists. The big advantage of voice commerce is its streamlined path to purchase, with convenience being a primary motivator for voice tech users when completing a purchase online. Our data also shows that voice tech users appreciate flexibility and support when shopping online. For example, voice tech users over-index significantly for click and collect delivery and a live chat box to speak with the company, which is really important for online retailers to consider.
Well, so we know that there is a great opportunity for voice commerce, but more specifically for regular purchases that consumers make.
That's right, Chase. Regular purchases, like grocery shopping, could be a prime opportunity for voice commerce and really where it can make its mark. We already know that voice tech users are shopping online, so it's really a case of converting them to using their voice assistants to do so. Our data also shows that almost 1 in 5 of all internet users are currently using a voice-controlled assistant or speaker, and 35% of internet users plan to purchase one in the next 6 months. So the opportunities for voice commerce could be extensive. From our data, we can see that 44% of voice tech users have made a grocery purchase online within the past 6 months, and are 32% more likely to do so than the average user. They are also purchasing groceries online more than they research by a ratio of 1.22 to 1. It's these kind of purchases, the ones that don't require much on-screen or in-store assessment, that voice commerce is most suited for. Amazon is well placed to own the voice commerce space and is making really big efforts to do so. For example, they've extended Amazon Prime to Whole Food shoppers. Increasingly, we are seeing other retailers like Walmart, Target, Costco, and Ulta Beauty partnering with Google Assistant to compete in this space.
That is interesting. Of course, we also know that there are some restrictions facing voice commerce too, like the ability to research, for example. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely, Chase. So the main problem is the way that we like to shop. In general, consumers like to research online before they buy. They like to read reviews, look at images, and compare products and prices to be fully informed and confident before they make a purchase decision. This makes up a large part of converting online visitors into sales.
Well, we can clearly see that this in the rise of these social media platform as a product research channel, especially on the more visual networks like Pinterest and Instagram, for example, which have really been ramping up their product research functionalities with stuff like shoppable ads, or the Pinterest lens as well. In fact, usage of social media as a product research platform has grown by 50% on a global level since around 2015. So over 40% of internet users now turn to social to get more information about a product before they're buying it. So amongst the youngest generations, who are also the most likely to be using voice assistants, social networks are actually ahead of search engines for this activity. And to reiterate your point quickly, this does tell us something quite important. Consumers like to see what they buy before they buy it in most instances.
Yes, and this touches on that fundamental point of voice commerce, that it's something that is quicker, more convenient, more hands-free and eyes-free than interacting with the screen. As such, anything that requires high research or investment is probably less likely to be purchased using voice tech. Compared to groceries, our data shows that 27% of consumers have purchased electronics online in the past 6 months, but are 14% more likely to have researched electronics online than to purchase them outright. So while there are many opportunities for voice commerce, there are also several limitations. One way of potentially overcoming this obstacle is to combine voice and screen. Next generation mobile phones and combined voice and screen home speakers like Amazon's Echo Show could also support voice commerce.
And media is another industry that will be greatly impacted by voice tech, especially music streaming on smart assistants at home.
That's right, Olivia. Another industry that is also impacted by voice tech is the music industry. Voice-controlled assistants and speakers have the built-in ability to directly stream music and audio content to consumers. And we also know that both music streaming services and an interest in smart home devices are trending upwards for consumers, pointing to a potential shake-up in the music industry. Our data shows that voice tech users over-index significantly for engaging with music and audiobook content. They are 63% more likely to use Apple Music and 52% more likely to use Amazon Prime Music than the average user. It's also really important to highlight that the music and audiobook service that they engage with have dedicated voice assistants. For example, Apple Music uses the Apple-owned Siri voice assistant, and Amazon Prime Music and Audible are both owned by Amazon and consequently use the Alexa voice assistant. Other brands like Spotify and Deezer are Alexa enabled. These are all easily accessed by smart home devices. To add to that, voice tech users are also more likely to use a premium or paid for account than the average user, which presents big opportunities for these brands. Additionally, smart home assistants may also be fueling more casual interactions with music. For example, users can query things like, Alexa, play the best of 70s music, rather than query a specific artist. Companies need to continue creating specific skills that will enhance the music streaming experience via voice assistants. Lastly, another industry that could be significantly impacted by voice tech is the healthcare industry, where voice tech could facilitate breakthroughs in patient care and efficiencies. A nationwide US study of pediatricians carried out by Boston's Children's Hospital found that 62% of pediatricians have used voice assistant technology, and 1 in 3 own and use at least one smart speaker. On top of this, a study by Harvard Business Review also found that 48% of pediatricians would be willing to use this voice tech in their clinical setting. But interestingly, we're much less likely to use it if a patient is present. The benefits of using voice tech in a healthcare setting includes the ability for staff to access medical records and information quickly, and it can also help patients to get directions and wait times to nearby hospitals, get answers to health-related questions from their home, and in general improve the patient waiting room experience. Voice assistants seem to be a useful way to start the patient education and engagement in the clinic and have it continue at home. However, the number one concern for voice tech in healthcare settings and across other industries is privacy.
That's right. So it's difficult to think about the future of voice assistants without addressing the privacy issue. And it's really interesting you talking about all of these potential industry use cases, because all of those convenience factors which make voice assistants such an attractive proposition for both consumers and specific industries, well, they're all underpinned by data collection at scale. Now, this is quite obviously a topic which has really received a great deal of attention recently, what with the introduction of the GDPR, together with various high-profile privacy-related media stories in the past year. So it's fair to say that many online companies are grappling with a data-driven trust deficit right now. So many of these companies are also the same brands moving headfirst, or at least considering their entry into voice technology.
That's a good point. I mean, these are household devices, or at least devices oriented around group settings. And for many of the industries where voice is having an impact, especially in the healthcare example you mentioned, Katie, sensitive information may be on the table here. So an important question for many industries or brands pondering the suitability of voice will be whether these assistants are sophisticated enough yet to distinguish between different people and therefore safeguard an individual's private information.
Well, of course, there's also the fact that compared to other more traditional forms of search or browsing, there's less awareness of how this data is being collected and how it's being used. And that presents a potential issue for the more privacy-aware consumers. And our data clearly shows that both smartphone assistant and smart home assistant users, they both display strong privacy concerns. More than 60% in each group say that they're concerned about the internet eroding their personal privacy, with slightly more expressing concern over how their personal data is being used by companies. So with these existing privacy concerns, it's not difficult to see why stakeholders in the voice tech industry would need to tread carefully. In order to respond to a user's command at any given moment, voice assistants within smartphones or smart speakers typically employ active listening tools, which use the device's microphone at all times to listen for a wake word. Now, these wake words trigger the voice assistant into action, at which point these assistants usually begin recording that interaction.
And despite assurances from brands, many consumers remain unconvinced that these devices only begin recording after the wake word is uttered.
Yeah, that's right. And this skepticism has been fueled by numerous instances in which smart speakers seem to have carried out privacy breaching actions without the wake word being spoken.
Yes, and there's also been concern from regulators over how transparent voice tech companies are with consumers, over how their data and recordings are stored, and how the consumer can access or delete these.
Yeah, that's right, it has. And I just want to pause on this point about transparency, because it's really important. Given that voice-enabled devices with vast data collection capabilities are required to be continuously listening, this gives them, and especially smart speakers within the home, access to personal information regarding the consumer's offline experience. So for brands with interest in voice, they need to be meeting the consumer on a level in which transparency and respect form the basis of how they're reaching out or interacting with them via this technology. Voice interactions are fundamentally different and more personal than interactions taking place on social media or on search engines. And that raises the stakes for brands. So they should be asking themselves about who they want to be when using these assistants, and particularly asking themselves how transparency and respect concerning user privacy can be part of a strong brand proposition. We can see from our data that voice assistant users are very proactive about taking steps to control their online footprint. Whether it's ad blocking, using private browsing windows, deleting cookies, or even using VPNs or virtual private networks, this audience is way ahead of average here. The users of either mobile or smart home assistants are actually almost 90% more likely to be using VPNs, and near to 50% more likely to be ad blocking each month. But while they're clearly adept at taking action to control their online footprints when browsing online, there may be less awareness when it comes to how voice technology collects and uses consumer data.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. And having access to ad blockers or VPNs is now as simple as downloading an extension in a browser. So there's a wealth of extensions to choose from as well.
Yeah, and not only that, users also can delete cookies with the click of a button in a browser too. And given the cross-demographic uptake of these online privacy measures, we're not just talking about tech-savvy younger users here either. But like you say, I don't think there's as much awareness around how to take similar measures with voice tech, especially when it comes to finding and deleting personal information collected by the devices.
Yeah, and in this post-GDPR environment, many consumers are demanding the ability to access and delete this kind of data. Now, something closely related to this topic is the opportunity for commercial messaging on voice. Quite simply, will consumers be receptive to advertising when it's delivered via audio? Because after all, that is a fundamentally different ad experience than seeing an ad displayed on a screen. Now, although we're still a long way from seeing widespread commercial messaging on voice devices, we can look at consumer reactions to online advertising to get some idea about how consumers might react. The most telling picture we have of the current consumer perception towards online advertising is by understanding the motivations behind ad blocking. So when we do this, we can see that it's fundamentally ad frustration and ad fatigue, which are the primary drivers of this behavior.
Yeah, we've consistently seen in our data that ad blocker users say ads are irrelevant, intrusive, or that there are simply too many of them.
Exactly, and your point about intrusiveness is what really matters here. A significant amount of consumers feel that ads are intrusive online, and this will most likely be referring to the irresponsible pop-up advertising which takes away from online experiences. But how will they feel about ads or recommendations using a voice interface? And that's a big question, not least because if you think about the voice interface, it doesn't support lists of items very well. So that means that, for example, if you're out and about asking for restaurant recommendations, any recommendations that are made via the voice interface might not be perceived as authentic, because any options that might make it to the end user may have sponsorship behind them. So it'd be interesting to see how this is overcome. But in looking at the attitudinal responses of voice tech users, there are some very interesting outlooks on technology and the internet in general, which give quite a promising prospect on commercial messaging in voice tech. So around 2 in 3 voice tech users say that they think there is too much choice online. And that's really telling. And it links to a wider trend in which some consumers feel very attached to technology, but are overwhelmed by the infinite shelf online. They think there's too much choice, essentially. We only need to think back to why people are using ad blockers to realize the scale of corporate messaging vying for consumers' attention amid a vast collection of products available on retail sites like Amazon. So if we do live in this economy of attention, these 2 in 3 voice tech users having second thoughts over this abundance of choice give us some idea about why voice assistants could carve out their own retail experience.
Well, something at the core of this is personalization. Consumer journeys are increasingly diverse according to individual needs and interests.
And experiences are also at the heart of this. Amid this abundance of choice, how do brands cut through the noise? Well, they engage people with compelling experiences.
And these are both areas where voice can excel, especially given that the user interface is underpinned by dialogue. So not only does that provide a much bigger opportunity to engage with consumers, but with the likes of Amazon and Google pushing these interfaces towards contextually driven conversational interactions, allowing the assistants to cater to individuals' needs and personalities is key. And this could also be key in unlocking commercial messaging on voice too. So now we're going to move on to the final section of this webinar, where we showcase a study we conducted in August in the UK and the US.
Thanks, Chase. Yeah, so we asked a fresh sample of respondents a range of more specific questions about the use of voice tech. Now, I mentioned earlier that smartphones act as a gateway to getting consumers into the voice tech ecosystem. So from this point of view, the current usage figures are both telling of brands' reputations now, but also of how they may fare in the future. Now, among our US and UK sample, Google's Assistant and Apple's Siri dominated, Siri being used by around a third of mobile voice users, and Google sitting more towards the 1 in 2 mark. To give some context to these figures, our global data shows that both the UK and in the US, the iPhone is the most commonly owned mobile brand, which positions Siri well for success. Samsung is the second most commonly owned brand in these markets, but Samsung's voice assistant Bixby doesn't fare as well against its competitors. This will mostly be a result of Google's Assistant being the default across the Android operating system. Consumers have to actively switch to Bixby or Alexa if they want to use it, and consumers would only be motivated to do this if it offered something different and better.
So I guess unlike with home assistants, mobile assistant choice is driven primarily by the mobile brand consumers choose in the first place then.
Yeah, exactly. And we also asked which mobile voice assistant features consumers are most using. For smartphone assistant users, functional behaviours were the leading motivation for turning to voice search, like asking for directions or checking the weather. This shows just how this technology on mobile is effective for quick decisions and changes on the go, but also how mobile voice search is still only really being used for very simple tasks that consumers could very easily do themselves. Interestingly though, we found that 57% of those we asked used their smartphone assistant while driving, which is a scenario where these activities on voice become very useful. Voice assistants integrating into cars has the potential to be a major growth opportunity for the tech going forward. Again, being able to get voice assistants in front of more people, but without having to rely on them consciously purchasing a voice-driven device.
So in terms of these voice-driven devices you're referring to though, our data shows that 18% of internet users do currently own a smart home assistant and 35% plan to purchase one in the next 6 months. So if we think about that, that means that almost half of digital consumers worldwide could be consciously engaging with smart home assistants in the future. So Katie, you're going to tell us a bit more about the top brands and the applications for smart home devices among users, right?
Thanks, Chase. We can clearly see the growth potential for smart home devices is immense. Amazon's Echo device in particular is a clear favourite, with 54% of smart home assistants owners using it as their main home device. Amazon's first mover advantage, continuous investment and aggressive marketing strategy has helped it to get to this position. Amazon launched their Echo device before either Google or Apple had a dedicated home voice AI system. The company not only invited third-party engineers to develop on top of it, but they most distinctly have an operating system on which users can actually buy products. This presents a significant advantage over other voice systems. Whereas Google Homes is primarily known for its search function and Apple's HomePod is mostly recognized for its speakers and sound quality. Amazon's relationship with external companies and frequent discounting of its products around holiday times has also helped fuel the adoption of Echo devices among a wider range of consumers.
So one of the obstacles facing smart home devices is persuading consumers that it's an essential device rather than a nice-to-have device. So the increased sophistication and capabilities of smartphones means that smart home devices need to work harder to make their value worth the additional expense.
That's right, Chase. And one of the ways that smart home devices is overcoming this obstacle is by allowing developers to create their own commands or skills for consumers to use, which not only increases a brand's engagement with the consumers, but also creates a wider range of functions for consumers to use. From our data, we can see that using the smart home device for practical activities like setting reminders is very popular, but entertainment and content presents a big area of opportunity. The number one feature for smart home assistant devices among users is to listen to music, with 67% of smart home users choosing to do so. And half of users also check the news on their smart home device. As we mentioned already, there is a big opportunity to broaden out music streaming services to casual listeners, especially among older age groups, with a significant portion of them saying they plan to purchase a smart home assistant in the next 6 months. 34% of smart home assistant users use their smart home device to find products to buy, but it is near the bottom of the list in the top features for smart home devices. Smart home assistants have the potential to become the centerpiece in consumers' homes and something that is integral in their daily lives. Overall, home assistants offer consumers a more entertaining, fun, and interactive experience.
So the central role of content and entertainment activities to smart home assistants makes sense given that these devices sit within quite a relaxed and entertaining and interactive environment. So in the same research, we investigated where people tend to keep their smart home devices. So unsurprisingly, most users keep these devices in the more relaxing environments within the home. So almost 2/3 of smart home users keep the device within the living room, and more than half keep them in the bedroom. In fact, around 16% say that they keep the devices in their bathroom. But thinking back to our previous conversation earlier about the opportunity for commercial messaging, This gives us a further glimpse into the kind of environment brands need to connect with consumers in. So these are fun and interactive environments, obviously, and the interactions need to be in line with that. We see more evidence of this kind of engagement when we ask smart home users the main reasons why they use these devices. So users of smart home devices are more likely than other users of other voice assistants to say that these devices are more fun and that they just are generally more interactive. So more than half say that. And that element of convenience really shines through, with around 6 in 10 saying that they're using these devices because they're quicker and easier than websites or apps. And around 40% say that these devices are more intuitive and helpful than websites or apps. So I guess if we were to look back and sum up quickly, it's clear that despite the previous growth we've seen in voice assistants across devices, we're going to see still plenty of growth to come, especially as the holiday season approaches and more promotional periods for smart speakers appear, lowering that barrier to entry. But there's clearly some way to go before voice can fulfill high hopes of it revolutionizing the e-commerce industry. Yes, it's certainly making headway, but to Katie's point, consumers like to know what they're buying before they're buying it. And they also like to see what they're buying before they're buying it too. There's evidence throughout our research of this. And for now, the gulf that exists between brand discovery and purchase in the consumer buying journey on voice largely relegates it to frequent purchase for the moment. But we are largely talking about Amazon here. So voice's future in commerce seems very bright. We just need to consider Amazon and the other largest player in the industry, Google, and how these companies make money to get some idea about the future trajectory of voice. So Amazon will leverage its ecosystem and bolster Alexa's role in the retail arm. Google, on the other hand, with its enormous role in the advertising industry, will be keen to explore ways of baking in commercial messaging into Google Assistant in a way which is authentic, transparent, and meaningful. We know this is what consumers are beginning to turn to as personalization, convenience, and a shift away from endless choice increasingly take hold. But for all this to work, transparency and respect towards consumer privacy needs to be a central part of any brand proposition within the voice industry. Without this focus on consumer privacy, voice assistants and those with a stake in voice assistants won't gain that trust factor which is so central in the modern data privacy landscape. So thanks very much for listening, everyone. If you have any questions about the topics we covered today or anything at all, feel free to get in touch with us. You can always find more about Global Web Index from our website, globalwebindex.com, which has details about our other products like our custom research offerings and our GWIQ analytics solution for audience validation and advertising effectiveness studies, and our new data on engagement with specific named brands. Thanks everyone, and bye.